So with that quick intro out of the way, you guys, as you can see, here we are in SWAT right now, or rather I should say Ready or Not. Now this is a game that has recently come out of essentially what would be considered like an alpha stage and is now sort of in a beta, really, even though they are calling it sort of early release or green light status right now on Steam. And this is a game that is very much reminiscent of SWAT 4, or rather is in a lot of ways a successor to SWAT 4, as well as that general sort of series of games. So if you're somebody that's played these sort of high adrenaline, incredibly slow paced but very methodical tactical room clearing games, things like Rainbow Six are going to really come back into the fold here as far as, looking at the sort of gameplay that concerns these types of games, as well as just the general flow of the missions themselves. Now, in the more recent times, they've really done a huge job to overhaul this title pretty much from the ground up. Now, I can't really talk about what the sort of pre-alpha game looked like, as we're still very much under NDA. But with that said, things have become a lot more polished. At this point in time, the AI teammates are able to do a lot more room clearing on their own without getting stuck on too many obstacles, and are for the most part able to navigate through stairs, which is something that, sometimes they had a little bit of a troubled past with in the previous releases, let's just say. And so far, the gunplay itself has been overhauled a little bit as well. The leading mechanics have been redone too, and as you can see, the primary goal here is of course to do the clearing of every single room in the area that you're in, making sure everything is safe, and taking it piece by piece until you have completed all of the objectives at the location that it is specified to be. Now currently there aren't too many available options as far as what you can do on the maps. They are currently mostly hostage rescue scenarios, a couple of bomb defusal runs, as well as what they call a barricaded suspects mode, in which you essentially have much more aggressive suspects that are going to be less likely to drop their firearms when you yell at them to make them basically get on the ground and give up, as well as drop their weapons. And there's a higher likelihood that the enemy is going to, in essence, pick up a gun or sneak out one of their hidden handguns and start shooting at you, even if they have gone down on the ground, so you don't necessarily know what's going to happen. Now, one of the things that I really like about this particular title is that there is this huge sense of urgency even when things aren't seemingly happening, because you'll randomly hear suspects yell, say that there's a gunman inside. You'll hear gunshots, especially in the missions where, it's something like a live shooter scenario where you have a very limited number of time before the number of suspects just keeps executing across the whole map various civilians, of course then lowering your potential kind of outcome for the final good score, and the good guys really triumphing in the end. And then in addition to that, just the various things that will happen, such as if you don't keep your suspects secured, they are very likely to run off and potentially pick up another gun, even off of their dead friend, especially if you haven't secured that and put it away, as for example evidence, into little evidence bags. So all of these things kind of culminate in an experience that by and large ends up being incredibly traumatic in some aspects, and also highly volatile, unpredictable, and leads you to really think on your feet in a lot of ways. You have to cover all your exits. You have to make sure that if there are certain areas that could be used for exfil by the enemy, then you bring the equipment to be able to stop them in their tracks. Now, you do have a number of tools at your disposal, since the enemies are very likely to lay traps on the other sides of doors and sometimes even right at your feet. You definitely want to check the floor as much as possible to see that there aren't any explosive traps, any flashbangs, etc. You can then also defuse them. The defusal mechanic is very simple, by just cutting a wire and then you're able to get away with it, essentially just defusing the trap completely. But sometimes it'll be on the other side of the door, forcing you to look for a different way in, or you could take the risk and blow up the door or kicking it in. and then essentially just have the explosive or the flash trigger so that you can continue on to your objective. Now, because the subjects have a tendency to flee across the various rooms in the houses, hotels, and other areas that you are in, you have something called a door wedge, which is basically just a more sort of big version of what you would see as like a doorstop in an office or even in your own home, and essentially just blocks the door so that if somebody tries to open it in the same direction that it should be opened, it'll effectively block any entrance into that area, or potentially just block exfil points again for the bad guys or any civilians that might be trying to flee into an area that could be dangerous for them, resulting in potentially crossfire scenarios where a suspect or, for example, a civilian may get hit, again potentially lowering your score and also just causing a whole lot of havoc. Now, none of these techniques are necessarily new. A lot of this stuff was already present in SWAT before, especially in SWAT 4 as it stands, and you still have the same ability to trigger commands by queuing them up and then sending those orders to your team, so that if there are two entrances into a room or you want to cover two different sort of angles on your suspects, then you're able to essentially use the mirror gun or the fiber optic wand, whatever you want to call it, to find out where the suspects are and then provide a pincer maneuver for your team to be able to catch the subjects unaware and have the element of surprise on your hand, such that you are actually able to have a successful infiltration into the room, as well as take care of any of the suspects that are going to be in there at that point in time. Now, the great part about the early version of the title so far is that the maps are actually quite varied. There's a lot of different scenarios that you can play through. There are a lot of different maps. Some are going to be really close quarters and tight. Others are going to be more wide open spaces, and then some are going to be set in industrial zones versus something that may be like a hospitality suite in a hotel, for example. So there's quite a few things happening here, a lot of different sort of events in motion a lot of the time. Now, currently, it is not 100% clear what the story is just as of yet. I believe the team is still sort of hashing that out, but we are told that there will be a story that goes along with the campaign portion of the title moving forward. And of course, we do have the co-op modes where you can play and team up with human players to be able to take on the enemy. A lot of times I find that these matches go a lot faster than they do with the AI teammates, as your human buddies are going to be a lot more capable of going through the rooms quickly, each one deploying a wand or mirror gun to be able to clear the rooms fast, and then also more of them carrying shields, allowing you to infiltrate various rooms while having your entire team covered from enemy fire, potentially, should that come down. There is also a PvP mode that is constantly being kind of rehashed. A lot has changed since the early access on the multiplayer, since those days. I'm not going to be covering it too much in this particular video, as I want to keep it relatively nice and short. However, what you will see is that there are a lot of improvements that have been made to that mode as well, versus what was available to those who were early backers of the game. And I find that it is quite a lot of fun. There's a lot of kind of tug-of-war happening with the good guys and the bad guys. You could call it like terrorists versus CTs in a lot of ways, so very reminiscent of Counter-Strike in some ways, but also a little bit more like Global Ops, which is a game that not too many of the younger audience are going to be familiar with. But the same idea there, where you have opposing teams kind of trying to exfiltrate VIPs, or in general keep them secured, while the bad guys try and come get them. So very interesting game mechanics there in that regard. Now, this time the weapon customization has also changed a little bit, but has become slightly more robust, with a lot more pieces that you can add onto your guns, as well as armor that you can customize, change, and basically outfit your characters to the mission at hand, because some missions will require that you have some kind of night optic devices. Others will require that perhaps you come in with a shield because the suspects are again barricaded and carrying heavy firepower. And there are going to be other missions where you could probably get away with going in with non-lethals, such as a beanbag shotgun and a kind of pepper spray paintball gun, to allow you to take down suspects really quickly, as well as any civilians, without doing too much collateral damage, which again is another really interesting mechanic here, where unlike your Call of Duties, etc., where the only option out is the lethal option, this kind of goes more in line with Splinter Cell's ideology that you can take down suspects using more non-lethal means, essentially clearing the path that way instead of taking everyone down and leaving a bloody mess behind. Now, there's still a lot to do in this game. A lot of things still need to get polished out, but as it stands, this is a game that I highly recommend everybody checks out. It is very much a really tactical, thinking man's shooter at this point in time. Now, to say that it surpasses any of its contemporaries would be a little bit hard, but the game is still in a very, very early state at this point in time, so I think we need to give these developers some support. It is a small team. A lot of them come from the modding community of the SWAT games, as well as other Unreal titles, and I think they deserve your money to continue making an amazing product. With that, I'm going to close this video out. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and stick around for more content in the tactical shooter genre.